Okay, Anita, I think we're ready.
Okay, good morning. This is Anita Casey at the State Bar Center, and I would like to welcome our over 200 participants to the second of 4 webinars that the State Bar is doing with our judges. This set of regional judges we have been referring to as the I-64 corridor. Monica Haddad, State Bar President, will introduce them a little bit more in detail in just a moment, but we have our judges from Cabell, Kanawha, and Putnam counties. Before I go any further, I want to mention that our annual meeting did not come off as planned, but on Friday, June 5 at 3 o'clock, our young lawyer and board officers will be sworn in at 3 o'clock. Those of you who are watching, if you have an interest, may watch that swearing in ceremony done by Chief Justice Armstead. It will be at 3 o'clock and it will be broadcast on courtswv.gov. The seminar today is 1 credit in law office management. We continue to get questions about the ethics requirement. It is not just in ethics. There are 4 categories: law office management, elimination of bias, attorney wellness, and ethics. So if you need 3 credits in one of those areas, this will qualify for 1. Our moderator will be introduced momentarily. It's Tanya Handley, and questions will be sent to Tim Bailey, who is one of our Kanawha County representatives. Please send your questions for the judges to Tim in question format at his email. That is tbailey@bjc4u.com. That's tbailey@bjc4u.com. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the rest of the program over to Monica to introduce our judges.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm pleased that the State Bar has been able to put together these COVID-19 webinars. We've done a number of them on substantive areas of law, ethics, attorney well-being. The last few have focused upon our judiciary, which has been great. It started with our Supreme Court, who we had a panel presentation with them as the courts were reopening. We then had a panel presentation with the judiciary up in the north central area where I am, up here in Morgantown and Harrison counties. This one here, of course, as you know, is the I-64 corridor panel presentation. And I'm grateful that our State Bar board members were able to jump in when we came up with this idea to do these regional presentations as the courts were reopening. And they have stepped in, just like your board representatives here today, to help put these together for all of you. Before I introduce our panel, I do want to let you know, if you haven't seen it already in the State Bar Blast, that there are 2 other panel presentations at other areas around the state. On June 4, there'll be a Northern Panhandle judicial panel presentation with Judges Cuomo and Hummel. And then on June 12, we'll have the same over in the Eastern Panhandle with Judges Carl, Lawrenson, and Nelson. So at this time, I would like to introduce the moderator. Her name is Tanya Handley. Tanya is the representative to the Board of Governors from the 4th District. She has been practicing law for 18 years in her office located in Point Pleasant. She's going to be assisted by Tim Bailey. He is a newly elected board representative to the 8th District for the State Bar Board of Governors. He is the managing member of Bailey, Javins, and Carter in Charleston. Tim will be fielding your questions. They will explain that further to you. And he will be assisting Tanya in this matter. So on to our esteemed panelists. Thank you, Judges Bloom, Reeder, and Howard for joining us here today. Judge Duke Bloom has served as a circuit court judge for the 13th Judicial Circuit in Kanawha County for almost 20 years. Previously, he practiced law for 20 years, during which time he served as a Kanawha County Commissioner. Judge Bloom is a past president of the West Virginia Judicial Association and is a graduate of the WVU College of Law. Chief Judge Reeder has served as a circuit court judge since 2012. He is now the Chief Judge of the 29th Judicial Circuit in Putnam County. Judge Reeder began the Putnam County Adult Drug Court in 2013, and he continues to be the presiding judge of that court. I'm pleased to say that Judge Reeder was a WVU College of Law graduate with Tim and myself in 1991. Chief Judge Howard. He was elected in 2016 as a circuit court judge to the 6th Judicial Circuit. He is currently the Chief Circuit Court Judge in Cabell County, where he also presides over the Cabell County Adult Drug Court. Judge Howard also received his law degree from the WVU College of Law. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you all as well for joining us. And Judge Howard lost the coin toss, so I believe he will be getting the first question. Judge Howard, what can we expect to encounter regarding change in courthouse entry and procedure?
Thank you, Tanya. Well, things are a lot different here now than they were pre-COVID. The courthouse was pretty lonely for a couple of months. We kind of wandered around here in the hallways with no activity, but now that the doors have been reopened, you will be greeted a little differently than before. The entrances, of course, I know we're speaking regionally, but when you're at our courthouse, the two entrances are the same. But the difference is if you come in on the magistrate court level, you'll only be allowed access if you are going to do business in the basement or in the magistrate court. You won't be allowed to come in and go to other floors. We're trying to keep any cross-contamination limited as much as possible. If you have business on the upper floors, then you have to come in on the 4th Avenue side, and you'll be allowed access to those floors. Everyone is given some instructions about wearing masks in the courtrooms, those types of things. If you don't come in with a mask, then we are giving people just the basic surgical mask to use. We are, in fact, right now, if I looked out the window of this courtroom out into the courthouse lawn, I would see a lot of people that would normally be congregated in the magistrate court area for hearings. We're having them all wait outside or in their cars, and we contact them by text message, or if they don't have a phone or something with them, then the bailiff will yell outside and bring them in one at a time for their cases. Security also tells people don't arrive early. We tell them that. We tell the attorneys that in all of our cases now. Please don't come like you used to 15, 20, 30 minutes early to hang out and socialize, because we're trying to limit the number of people on each floor. So we're asking people to show up right at the time of your hearing. Nobody's going to yell at you for being a couple minutes late. Everybody is, all the judges are very understanding of the situation, because we're trying to limit the number of people in the building. I think we have to be courteous and respectful of all the other offices that we share this building with. And the old days of having 40, 50 people in the hallway on a big abuse and neglect call docket disturbs people, let's say, in the county offices across the hall. It makes everybody nervous now. So we're just limiting the number of people that we have in the building, and all of the instructions are typically given to people as they come in from our security guards.
Thank you, Judge Howard. Judge Reeder, how about in Putnam County? Anything to add?
Well, we've implemented a lot of the same things that Judge Howard talked about. And additionally, when you come to the Putnam County Courthouse now, the county has installed at the entranceway a temperature monitor that monitors the temperature of each person as they come in. You actually stand in front of it and it checks your temperature. And if your temperature is over, I believe it's 100.3 degrees, we will not allow you to be admitted into the building. And like Judge Howard, I think, said with regard to Cabell, we are requiring people who come into the building to wear masks now. And it's incumbent on you to have your own mask, but if you don't, we, like Cabell, have a limited number of masks that we can provide to people when they come in. But that, in addition to limiting the number of people in the building, are the primary changes that we've made so far.
Thank you. And Judge Bloom in Kanawha County?
I'd like to first say that I am so proud of all the lawyers in West Virginia. They have adapted and literally changed the way they practice law on a dime. We have gone from a actual physical presence in the courtrooms to a virtual presence, and it's worked extraordinarily well. Most of the circuit judges in Kanawha County are doing everything virtually. I think that's true of most of the family court judges. We are allowing some stuff to take place in person in magistrate court, but we are very restrictive. As you all know, we were one of the hot spots around the state early on, and many of our probation officers and other employees in the courthouse came down very early on with the COVID-19. So we have, our building was closed by the health officials for nearly 2 months, and we got it on the virtual bandwagon pretty quickly. And we too have a monitor that checks people's temperatures as they come in. Masks are required. The lawyers are required to notify their witnesses and their clients that they have to have masks. And we, like the other two courts, have a limited supply of masks that are available. But we've gone from probably 1,200 people a day in the building. We are, we're probably down to under 200 people a day in the building, not including employees. We are not taking any deliveries at all. You can't hand deliver anything to the courts. Mail is being sanitized, and it's taking a great deal of time for it to be delivered to the courts now. So the best way, generally speaking, to reach us, and it may depend on the particular judges, but for the most part, we're asking that we be emailed copies of any pleadings that we need to receive. The clerk's office is seeing people by appointment only. That's both the circuit clerk and the magistrate clerk. If we're asking that if you come down to file something, that if you leave all your paperwork in a Dropbox for the clerk's office, preferably you'll contact the clerk's office by mail. You're not going to be admitted up to the clerk's office just to file paperwork. I would say also that those that are being permitted to enter the building, unless they are a minor or some other protected type of person, they are not allowed to bring any guests with them. They are to come on their own. So we are being very restrictive and very risk avoidance.
Thank you, Judge Bloom. Judge Reeder, are there changes in the configurations or furniture arrangements in any of the courtrooms in your circuit?
No, we haven't really rearranged how the furniture is actually placed in the rooms. We have changed how people are allowed to sit in the rooms, though, and we are observing the social distancing and requiring that people sit at least 6 feet apart, which in our courtrooms really hasn't been a problem because there's room for that to be accommodated. And we haven't had any jury trials or anything like that yet, so that hasn't been an issue. Obviously, once we resume having jury trials, that may become an issue, and we may have to make some different arrangements with regard to the jury box. The biggest changes that we've made from a furniture standpoint in our county have to do with the waiting areas, where we have removed some of the seating from the waiting areas, and we've also put some markings on the floor in those areas to allow people to know what 6 feet actually is, so that they'll be able to maintain that distance. But one thing I was going to say when I spoke before, and I forgot to, is all of our procedures that we've adopted in Putnam County are actually set forth in the administrative order that I entered back on May 15th, which has attached to it a list of our operating procedures. I think that was provided to the participants of this conference, but if it wasn't, any lawyer that did not receive that and would like to, if you'll just contact my office, we can certainly provide it. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Judge Bloom, any changes or in the furniture or configurations in the courtrooms in Kanawha County?
Much like Putnam County, we have basically taken a lot of chairs, a lot of furniture out of the lobbies for the magistrate court. There have not been much change in the physical configuration of the courtrooms themselves. And if we also have adopted COVID procedures for entering the building and use of the building, and they're available from the circuit clerk's office if anyone needs to get copies of those. But we're like Putnam County. We've just tried to maintain the distance. We have put some markings. It's a little slower once more people are being admitted to the building. It will be slower getting from floor to floor because of the size of the elevators. Only 2 people will be permitted on an elevator at any one time.
Thank you, Judge Bloom. Judge Howard?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, so far in Cabell County, we haven't really changed the furniture in the courtroom because we've had so few people in here. But yesterday, I had a pretrial hearing via Skype on a murder case that I have. It's a pretty big trial coming up. It'll take over a week, and it's set to start on the first day that jury trials are allowed again at the end of this month. So the attorneys had some concerns, and we discussed logistics about how we put a jury in the box. It's obviously going to be different than it used to be. So we had a little planning committee yesterday, came into the courtroom, and we decided how we were going to rearrange furniture for the trial. And it will look very different than what everyone's used to. Instead of the counsel tables facing the bench, we're going to turn them sideways because we're going to put the jury out in the audience and spread them out. The jury won't be squeezed up here in the box. So they'll be social distanced out in the first 2 or 3 rows. So in an effort to keep that dynamic the same as you would present a case to a jury, we're going to turn counsel table sideways. And instead of putting the witness up here beside the judge, we're going to put the witness down on the platform, and everything will be conducted side to side instead of facing the court. That way the jury will still be seeing everyone from the side. They won't be looking at the backs of the attorneys and so forth. So it'll take some rearranging, moving microphones around, all that kind of stuff. But we're also going to let the attorneys in a day early to do practicing, some trial runs. So that's one of the major furniture changes that will be coming up for the summer.
Thank you, Judge Howard. The next question that we have encompasses actually some of the ones that we've been receiving, that Tim's been receiving via email. What kinds of remote hearings have you been conducting, and what kind will you continue to entertain through that manner, and what type of medium? And that question is for you, Judge Bloom.
Well, originally we were limited by the Supreme Court as to what meetings we would have remotely. Only those emergency type of matters, abuse and neglects, and but in the last probably 6 or 7 weeks, I can't think of a type of case that I haven't had a hearing. And I've done adoptions, I've had numerous abuse and neglects. In fact, again, it's a tribute to the parties and the lawyers that last week I had a hearing and there were 24 participants, and then we had 3 additional witnesses. Throughout that proceeding, we had 27 different people. It would have been extraordinarily difficult to socially distance those people in the courtrooms and in the lobbies, having hearings backed up one after the other. So we'll be doing a little bit of everything. I think we'll be doing pre-trials, I've done criminal sentencings, I've done criminal pleas. All the paperwork is filled out and emailed to us. We review it, sign it, put the defendants under oath, and they attest to the truthfulness of the statements contained therein and go through all the rights just like we would if they were in the courtroom. And it seems to work very well. I actually can't think of a type of case that we have not handled. And if you would have asked me 3 months ago if we could do as much as we can do virtually, I would have said it would be impossible. But again, through everybody working together, it seems to work very, very well.
Thank you, Judge Bloom. Judge Howard?
Yeah, we've done the full spectrum, just like in the other counties. We serious matters and civil cases, motions to dismiss, summary judgment, typically just attorneys. And it's been nice, I think, for attorneys in Charleston and even further away from us here in Huntington, because they're sitting in the comfort of their office and everybody can see and hear each other just fine. And it cuts down on travel time and those expenses. We've conducted just about every kind of criminal matter that you can imagine, and abuse and neglect. Like Judge Bloom said earlier, I'm just really impressed with the bar. Overall, everyone has really adapted to this method of practicing law. We have a few attorneys that are still struggling a little bit with getting on Skype video. My secretary does a tutorial with everybody as they come on to try to help them get adjusted. It's a little easier for the judge if everybody's on Skype video, because that way we can control people talking over each other better than just having them on the phone. So we appreciate everybody's efforts to continue to get their Skype video up and working. But we're doing pretty much everything by Skype. A vast majority, I would say still 75 to 80% of my hearings right now are via Skype.
And thank you. Judge Reeder?
I would just echo what the other judges said. We've done basically our full gamut of hearings by video, and for the most part, I agree with Judge Bloom. It's worked remarkably well. The lawyers have done a great job adapting to it, and probably even a better job than the court has, and it's worked much better than I expected that it would. And you know, we still prefer video as a way to handle these matters right now. So I would assume we'll continue to be doing a lot of things for video for the time being.
And this is a question by attorney Angela Beblo, and I apologize if I butchered that last name. How are you all handling the presentation of evidence during these remote hearings?
Is that directed to me?
You can take it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the one area that I would say is a little more difficult, but we're swearing the witnesses over the video just like we would as if they were in the courtroom. And of course, the court reporter is taking down everything that's said just as if we were in the courtroom. The only issue where we've had, the only area where we've had any issues, I should say, from my perspective, is it is a little more difficult when you're dealing with documents and documentary evidence. I've had to have people email me things or send me things, exchange documents a couple days before the hearing just to make sure that everyone was on the same page with regard to any documents that were going to be referred to. But obviously, cases where you have to take evidence are more difficult than just run-of-the-mill hearings, but we've handled it pretty well, I think, so far.
Thank you. And Judge Bloom, how about in your court with regard to presentation of evidence in remote hearings?
I think the lawyers have done an excellent job at emailing anticipated exhibits to the court and to each other so that they can proceed that way. Eventually, we'll be switching to Teams, which is another Microsoft product. And I think it's a little easier for everybody to display the evidence on the screen, much like you can on Zoom. It's a little more difficult with Skype. But so far, the lawyers have done a good job at circulating the exhibits prior to the hearings.
Okay. And Judge Howard?
The same. Yeah, it hasn't been too much of an issue yet, obviously, because we're not having jury trials and trying to show evidence to other people. And once we do have juries here, they'll be here in person. So that'll be a little different. As far as just documentary evidence for hearings, where we're really the only ones that have to see it, I've had the same experience. It's I've been emailed all the documents ahead of time. And if there is an issue where counsel on an opposing side doesn't have it, then there have been a few times where I've just taken a break from the hearing and we've electronically exchanged it, given everyone a chance to review it, and then reconvened. So hasn't really been too much of a problem yet.
Thank you. Attorney Kevin P. Davis submitted questions, most of which I believe we covered, but one that we haven't is, what is the proper attire for video hearings? And that can go to Judge Howard.
Well, it's a good question. And I haven't really had to raise this issue with any attorneys, and actually haven't even roundtabled it with the judges here in my circuit, because it's never been an issue for me. Everybody who has appeared on Skype for the hearings has been properly attired. I have not been a stickler on wearing a tie at these hearings, and so a lot of the attorneys have been in polo shirts and stuff like that, and so we've conducted it a little differently than if it's been in the courtroom. I've seen the national stories, like I'm sure we all have, where attorneys were showing up in their pajamas and that type of thing. Obviously, that would be an issue, but I haven't experienced that. Everybody's been either still in their tie, which this is the first time I've worn a tie in 2 months, which was kind of weird putting it back on. It wasn't great, but most people are going business casual, and I have not personally had a problem with that. Some of the other judges may, but I'm okay with business casual when it's just a hearing with me.
And Judge Reeder or Judge Bloom, either of you have anything else with regard to proper attire?
I've kind of handled things the same way Judge Howard indicated. If you know, I've had lots of lawyers appear with without a tie on, or in a golf shirt, which obviously normally in the courtroom we wouldn't allow. But given the fact that we're over video, I've been a little more lenient in that area, and really it hasn't been a big issue.
And we're exactly the same. I don't really care if it's business casual or if they're wearing a tie. It really doesn't matter. Heck, I don't care whether they have on long pants or shorts, since I'm not seeing there's long pants or shorts.
And now this is for Judge Reeder. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the attorney's name. Amy Rothman Malone. Now that things are opening back up, are the judges still utilizing video conferencing for hearings, or will all hearings moving forward be done in person?
We're still utilizing video conference as much as we can. If you refer to that administrative order that I referred to earlier, it still indicates that our preferred method for the time being is to conduct things by video, because that's what the Supreme Court guidelines also prefer. But we have started to do some hearings in person, and my guess is we'll gradually do more and more. There are just some kinds of hearings, particularly sometimes involving juveniles and those types of cases, that are difficult sometimes to do by video. So, but to the extent we can, we're doing most things by video.
That would also be true in Kanawha. It is the preferred method, and I'm not aware of any in-person hearings in circuit court in Kanawha County yet. I think perhaps we're being extremely cautious because of what we experienced, but by the same token, the social distancing is going to be extremely difficult to maintain safety for everybody. So I would anticipating, depending on what happens in the community, if there's no community spread and the numbers go down to next to nothing, then we'll probably be more comfortable having them in the courtrooms. But I am particularly concerned about criminal cases. I'm glad to hear the tips that Judge Howard had for the cases that he's going to have, criminal cases. I don't anticipate that our courtrooms are big enough to do criminal cases. I suspect we'll be doing those in the old ceremonial courthouse, courtroom in the old courthouse, and we will be separating the jurors from each other and the parties from one another. and using great amount of social distancing.
Judge Howard, anything to add?
Well, we do probably hear about, I'm going to guess about 20 to 25% of our hearings are in person now, just a limited number. But we highly prefer the video hearings and hope to continue that for a long time to come. I don't know, I don't think you can probably hear this because it's just a muffled tone, but right behind me on the other side of this wall, Judge Farrell is conducting arraignments from his office. Normally, we have been doing all arraignments. I haven't seen a person in orange and handcuffs down here in months. All of that's being done from the jail, Skype. But we have in-person arraignments that we're now starting to do. And so the way we're doing those today is he's sitting in his office conducting from his office on Skype, and across the hall, the defense attorney is in a separate room with their client, Skyping to him across the hall, and the prosecutor is of course upstairs in their office, and probation will be attending from the basement. So everybody's still attending from different rooms, even on in-person arraignments. So we're continuing to try to adapt and find different ways to do that and protect people until we're sure we have a handle on this.
Thank you. Judge Bloom, once in-person hearings begin back in Kanawha County, will you allow attorneys to request permission to have the hearing remotely when higher risk participants are involved, either the parties or the attorneys?
Absolutely. I think that's probably an excellent idea, an excellent suggestion. And yes, and quite honestly, I don't foresee us getting back to where we were for some time, probably until there's a vaccine available or some effective treatment. So this is not, I believe, a short-term thing. I think it's going to become more the norm over the next year, probably.
Thank you. Anything different for either Judge Reeder or Judge Howard?
No, we would certainly honor that. And like I think the other judges, we prefer it ourselves. And we've talked about it, and I think we're using this as an opportunity moving forward, maybe indefinitely, to do a whole lot of hearings via Skype. Even if this virus is long gone and behind us, there's really no reason. This kind of forced us into technology that's been around for a long time, we've just never used. And now that everybody's become familiar with it, there's really no reason to go back to, especially when you have attorneys out of town who can just simply log on and conduct a hearing with just the judge this way. I think probably as long as I'm on the bench, if people are requesting to do a hearing by Skype, I would be happy to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you. Judge Reeder, for those attorneys who represent incarcerated individuals, what responsibilities fall on the attorney for scheduling video conference times with the regional jails, and or how much of that does the court coordinate?
Right now, the court has coordinated all that. The lawyers contact my office or the other judges' offices and get a time for the hearing, and then my office takes the lead on doing the notice and making sure that the Skype notice goes out to everyone, including the jail, and making sure that that's done. And we have electronic filing down here now, so that all goes out over the electronic filing system as well.
Is that the same in Cabell County, Judge Howard?
It is. We take the lead on it. My secretary has been amazing at handling this and making sure that everyone gets the email. So all they have to do is click on that email and click on join the meeting, and we've coordinated it with. I have to also give a shout out to the Western Regional Jail here in our area. They have set up 2 or 3 Skyping stations that they constantly keep staffed with COs, and they have been very respectful, efficient, just really done an amazing job getting inmates in and out of hearings immediately. And I think they love this because they don't have to transport people down here to the courthouse all the time. So they look at this as I think a real advantage. If they can keep the courts happy doing it this way, it saves them a lot of a lot of stress there. So they've gone above and beyond making Skype work. So it's gone really well. But we handle all of that scheduling for the attorneys.
And Judge Bloom, that would be the same in Kanawha County as well?
That is the same. We are setting up the schedules, and South Central Jail has done a wonderful job too. In fact, each judge has been given, some designated time, so we know how to schedule so that we don't get conflicts with the other judges. But they have set up a number of stations. I have had lawyers actually go to the jail and be on the Skype call with their clients. Not a practice I necessarily recommend. I do think they need to confer with their clients before the hearing and be prepared and have their clients prepared. But I frankly wouldn't recommend they actually go to the jail to participate in those Skype conferences with their clients.
And sticking with Judge Bloom, what are the plans for working around what's called call dockets or cattle call dockets in your courts or in the magistrate courts in your circuit?
Well, we've never actually done that in the circuit courts of Kanawha County. I suspect they did it when I first started practicing law, but it hasn't been done for many years. I know some counties still do that and still do that. And we have for years been trying to keep the cattle calls down in magistrate court, but we have had administrative orders that prohibit them from setting cases except every 15 minutes for years. Perhaps we haven't enforced that as well as we should have, but it's being strictly enforced at this time.
And Judge Howard in Cabell County?
Yeah, we have done the call dockets here for years since I've practiced, and that practice has pretty much ceased now. We've spread things out 15 to 30 minutes depending on the type of hearing. We have made some major changes in magistrate court. Anyone who practices here knows that misdemeanors were always at 9 and felonies were always at 10:30. We've now moved felonies to the afternoon, and we've moved misdemeanors into 3 blocks at 9, 10, and 11 and spread them out so that it's really reducing the stress on each floor with the number of people. And I'll also mention this when talking about communication and Skyping from the jail. I've done this a number of times, and if an attorney hasn't had a chance to do a hearing or experience this, it's always an option. Let's say an attorney is Skyping from their office and their client is sitting in Western Regional Jail, and we start to have a breakdown in the hearing, and it becomes apparent that the client needs to talk with the attorney. I will leave the meeting, and I'll ask the prosecutor to leave the meeting, and I will give them I'll ask them how much time they need. If they need 10 minutes with their client, then we'll rejoin the meeting. So that way they can see it's a secure meeting. They can look at the computer and see that they're the only two there. They can basically have a conference privately with their client. And then when we join back in, we resume the hearing. So there are ways for you to still communicate with your client while doing these hearings. It's a little awkward. You don't have that person to lean over and whisper in your ear like you're used to, but so I've tried to accommodate that as much as possible. Sometimes in civil hearings, even just leaving the meeting and letting the attorneys work out some of their differences and then joining back later.
And Judge Reeder, anything to add on that?
Not really. Call dockets aren't really an issue in Putnam County either. We've scheduled things in magistrate and circuit court for a long time, just individually. So the one thing I do want to add, though, that I didn't have the opportunity, I want to join Judge Bloom and Judge Howard in commending the jail in the way they've handled these matters, though. I have been pleasantly surprised as well how smoothly things have worked in terms of Skyping from the jail.
Thank you. Judge Howard, one of the submitted questions is, are more lawyers getting closer to contempt with the video being less formal than in person in a courtroom with a bailiff and other trappings?
No, I've never experienced that issue in my years on the bench. In fact, yesterday I did an adoption, and we actually had it in person. They requested it, and I let the young person come up who was being adopted. They stood up behind the bench, and I handed them the gavel, and they said, "Wow, do you use this?" And I said, "Actually, I've never had to use that in all of my last 4 years on the bench. It's never been an issue at in-person hearings for me, and it has not been an issue on Skype. That's why I do think it is convenient to have video, because if people do start to talk over each other, not even heated or intentionally, if the judge just does this, that's the one thing they teach you in judicial college, the judicial hand. It does seem to work. So you hold up the hand and usually everybody stops talking for a minute. You can regain control and then everybody's really respectful. But I've never had an issue with our bar being disrespectful or nearing contempt.
Judge Reader, any issues with decreased decorum?
Hasn't really been an issue at all with the lawyers. The only issues I've had tended to be with parties. I had an abuse neglect the other day where, and I think it was just an issue of, because she was on the telephone and kind of saw this more as a telephone conference than a court proceeding, one of the parties kept interjecting and wanting to talk, and I had to obviously stop that, and I had to speak fairly harshly to her to get her to stop. But other than that, no, I haven't had any problems. The lawyers have been very respectful for the most part, and hasn't been an issue.
And Judge Bloom?
I agree. The lawyers have been very good and very respectful and try to make it easy for everyone. One of the problems you have, the more people you have on, sometimes you end up with an echo, and we have to ask everybody to mute themselves and the echo goes away. And then we ask them before they speak just to put the microphone back on. And I did have, as Judge Reader indicated, someone who was a litigant in an abuse and neglect case had a comment on everything. And I found out as the administrator of the hearing, I could actually remotely mute them and control that a little better.
We have discussed masks in some detail, but with regard to Putnam County, Judge Reader, are the attorneys responsible for ensuring their respective clients have proper face coverings?
Yes, the attorneys are responsible for advising their clients and any witnesses that they intend to bring to an in-person hearing to have appropriate face covering. Now, we don't require a specific type of mask or anything like that, just some type of face covering. And as I indicated before, if someone showed up here and didn't have an appropriate mask of some kind, we do have a limited number that we can provide, but for the most part, we've placed that burden on the lawyers to make sure that their clients have appropriate face covering.
Okay, and Judge Bloom?
Same for us. And while we do have a limited supply, should we run out and people don't have them, they will not be admitted to the building.
And Judge Howard?
Yeah, it's the same. We, everybody in the courtroom, including myself and the bailiff, my court reporter, we all wear the surgical mask, and we require everyone who comes in to wear one, no exceptions. But it is, like Judge Reader said, a face covering. So we've had people put their scarves around, and if they don't have one, we supply them one. Hasn't been too big of an issue.
And would you expect attorneys to include a reference to a mask or face covering in their notice of hearing or their witness subpoenas?
We put it in our notice that goes out for hearings. We have a new paragraph that we've inserted in all of those that basically gives people some instructions. Don't show up to your hearing early, come right on time, and wear a face covering. And so we make sure that goes in all notices. And if it's not in the notice that the attorney sends out, then usually my secretary follows up and sends a reminder. But that's, everybody's starting to catch on, so it hasn't been too big of an issue.
Okay. I have gotten the notice from Ms. Casey that we are about ready to wrap up. We do have one final question. And I believe Judge Bloom spoke a little bit about a different possible platform than Skype or Zoom. The question submitted is, understanding that the Supreme Court uses Skype for business, do you find one platform such as Skype or Zoom meeting better than the other? And if you would prefer Zoom to Skype, is it okay to have one of the parties set up the conference using Zoom versus Skype? And we will throw that question to Judge Reader, if that's okay.
I've used both Zoom and Skype. I've used Zoom more for meetings like this. I think Zoom may, in my opinion, work a little bit better than Skype, but we've been using Skype for all of the hearings, and we'll continue to do that, though, because that's what the Supreme Court basically mandated that we use. So that's what we're going to use until we switch to Microsoft Teams or some other format through the court. But we haven't had a lot of problems with Skype either, though. It's been effective from our perspective.
And Judge Howard?
I prefer Zoom. I think it's more user friendly, and this is nicer than what I see when we Skype. But like Judge Reeder said, basically our bosses told us to use Skype, so that's what we're using for hearings. And I think it has to do with security. I've heard of images being thrown up in meetings on Zoom, and I've never experienced that, but I think the IT department's working through and trying to find even better formats for us to use in the future. So we'll do whatever they tell us, but so far it's been working pretty well.
And Judge Bloom?
I think Zoom definitely is much more user-friendly, and I wish that they had the security protections that the others have. Skype is much more secure, and obviously, particularly with the abuse and neglects and some of the other confidential type hearings we have, that's extremely important. So we are limiting to Skype, and as I said, depending on how long this goes, Microsoft is going to phase out Skype and go to Teams. So we will at some point be transitioning.
Thank you, Judge Bloom, and thank you to all the judges for being here today and answering all these questions. We wanted to give an opportunity to each judge to address or close out anything you wanted to add or didn't get an opportunity to say today. So Judge Howard, anything to add?
Well, just thank you for having us on today and letting us share a little bit of our experience from this side of it. Hopefully it's going smoothly for the attorneys. I'm not far out of practicing law, so I know the challenges, and I try to remember that every day when I come up here. If you are, I would just encourage any lawyer out there who has not done a Skype hearing to please feel free to call my office, and my secretary Angie will do a tutorial with you and help you get everything hooked up so that you can do Skype video and audio. And I just want to thank all the attorneys for adapting to this new age.
Thank you. Judge Reeder?
I would just echo what Judge Howard said, and I'd also indicate, I've referenced it a couple times, if any lawyer would like a copy of our administrative order, they're welcome to call my office and speak to my law clerk, Caitlin, and the number here is 304-586-0262. Also, if you have any questions about Skyping or about conducting video hearings, if one of the lawyers has not conducted one yet, just contact my office as well, and we'll be glad to walk you through how to get it set up and how to do that.
Thank you, Judge Reeder. Judge Bloom?
I'd just like to thank everybody for tuning in today and being a part of this, because it's a learning process for all of us. And certainly if people have suggestions as to how we can improve this system and do it better and more efficiently, we'd be happy to hear that. And like the other judges, my assistant, Melissa, is happy to do a little tutorial with anybody who has not been on Skype yet, to tell them how it works, and even do a test with them so that they can be ready and prepared. So thank you all for your interest and participation today.
Great. Thank you so much. And now, Ms. Casey?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Thank you, judges. We really appreciate your doing this. Talking about Skype was good timing at the end. Let me refer you to the Bar Blast. The Supreme Court is offering Skype training. You will get law office management credit. Please check the Bar Blast for the dates and times. I will say that since the COVID-19, we used to have about a 33% opening rate on the Bar Blast. It's jumped up to about 90. So I encourage you to continue to check the Bar Blast every Tuesday morning. With regard to today's webinar, very shortly after we conclude, you will receive a confirmation by email from the State Bar. You must accept that confirmation for the credit for this event to go on your transcript. Do not let it sit there. It will not go to, will not go in the transcript unless you accept it. With regard to the credit, we are offering credit only for West Virginia. Unfortunately, we do not have sufficient personnel or the financial ability to